Who will the Bengals take at 31? Who are some mid-round targets? And should former Bearcats become Bengals? Tony Pike is here to discuss that and so much more on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Hi again, everybody. I'm James Rapien of allbengals.com and Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Welcome in. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. And when you're done watching this video, make sure you download the iHeartRadio app and check out Tony Pike on ESPN 1530's Cincy 360, noon to 2 every single weekday. So you don't even have to be in Cincinnati to tune in. You can listen on the app wherever you go. T Pike, my man, I appreciate the time. And despite what some may think because of our banter on social media, we do get along. So I appreciate you carving out some time. Let's start with the draft. It's just over 2 weeks away. Can't really believe it's been the fastest draft season of my professional life, I would say, because, well, I started my first mock in April. It wasn't January. It wasn't December. It wasn't February. And so how do you feel? What are your overall thoughts, 1,000-foot view thoughts on the 31st overall pick?
I just think it's extremely unique because of the way the Bengals have built this roster right now. They have hit an absolute home run in free agency. So the biggest need right away is off the board. I mean, you could go and say we need another offensive lineman, which I think is true. But if you don't get one early, you're not crushed about it. And they have a unique perspective in this, that when you look at all these other teams that are drafting or Super Bowl contenders that are drafting, there is a visible need on the roster. When you look, okay, what do they need to do in the draft? You can say, this is exactly what they need to do in the draft. The Bengals are in this weird kind of depth building move in the draft, which is, it's a great place to be because you had all this money to spend. And a lot of this because you had Joe Burrow and you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and all these key pieces on rookie deals still. So you've built it the right way. You've built it from the ground up. And now it's that depth word. I used to be jealous of TG, listen to Mel Kiper and stuff during the draft. And it's like, well, what does this team really need at depth at different positions? And for years now, what have we said here in Cincinnati? Well, they need an offensive lineman. Yeah. Last year was the Chase versus Sewell. There's none of those debates going on right now because this team handled their business. And I think, to your point, it's such a weird, unique feel that the draft is so close, and yet you haven't had to dive in as much as you have in years past because the Bengals roster as it is right now is really, really good.
Yeah, it is. It's unique, and there isn't the debate yet. And I think that the debate could come on draft night if two guys fall, if a Kaiir, Elam, or an Andrew Booth fall to 31. And I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but it seems like the fan base is really leaning corner. Yeah, it's obviously a need. Where do you rank and how do you rank the Bengals' biggest needs before we start talking about some of these players that they could target at 31?
I honestly think if you're the Bengals and you're in that war room and Frank Pollock feels that there is a starter available, specifically at center, you go get them. And that's the trust that you have in your coaching staff to say, look, you've met with these guys, you've talked to these guys, what do you think of them? And it needs to just be an honest conversation of, I think he can be a day one guy, because if he's not a day one guy, I'm not drafting for the future of the offensive line right now, then I'm going corner. But to me, after corner, it gets really unique for this team because I hate to think of it, but down the road, there's going to have to be some tough decisions. So you might need to load up on a wide receiver. You might need to find a safety. But corner, to me, if it's not a day one starter, is the biggest need.
Yeah, I could totally see that, especially with the way they built this team, built the defense and free agency. But I agree with you. And it's funny how often we agree. We were both on the right side of the Chase Sewell argument. And now I look at it.
Remember that lead up?
Oh, it was like, I can't believe you want to give him another toy. Yeah. When his knee is shattered. I mean, couldn't be more right. I've never been more right in my life about a take because I really pivoted in the last month leading up to the draft was so hardcore. I'm not even going to listen to you if you say Sewell. And when you take that strong of a take, and hell, you talked about it every single day,
right?
As did I. You know, it was
hard. We did a draft show. On location, and when Sewell was when Chase was selected, people booed. And
what?
They
booed?
People were angry that
oh my God.
The Bengals have say goodbye to Joe Burrow, say goodbye to this. And I'm just thinking, like, and you haven't even seen the guy play. Like, you've been so enamored that the Bengals need O-line, they need O-line that you don't even care what else is out there. And then the guy comes in and has arguably the best rookie season of any wide receiver ever. And now you're sitting back thinking, okay, they got Chase, and now their offensive line is in the best place it's been in years. It's truly a remarkable difference of what a year makes leading up to this draft.
Let me tie both of those drafts together in the way I see it, because it was funny. You know, I was the resident John Ross supporter before he was picked. And that was part of the reason why Team Soul didn't want Jamar Chase, right? You could find a receiver later. They found T, they have Tyler. You could find, and I was like, look, you can't let your past impact the future. You can't let that mistake, and that's what it ended up being, I understand that, impact what you do in 2021. And the same thing I think goes for 2022, because I think the majority of people, certainly the majority of people on this channel, are thinking cornerback, not to the degree that they were offensive line last year. Not saying that, but still are thinking it. But I look at it, and much like you said, if Tyler Linderbaum is there at 31, I have a really hard time saying, hey, Frank, we passed on Penei Sewell last year. And we got some of these proven guys, but we passed on Sewell last year. We got you Jackson Carman. We're going to pass on Tyler Linderbaum, who's the best interior athlete in this draft. And I know he didn't test, and I know he's got shorter arms, but guess who he's not? He's not Billy Price, just like Jamar Chase isn't John Ross. And so that's who I would take at 31 if he's there. And I think because he didn't test, Tony, I think there's a shot that he is there. I think there's a shot he does fall because he's a smaller center. Yeah. But man, if you could get him and lock him up essentially for 5 years and move Karras to left guard, I feel pretty good about those starters.
I don't know where your weakness is if you had 4 new starters and Jonah Williams. I mean, you talk about a team that gave up historical sacks last year, turned around, and now they're completely redone on the offensive line. I mean, and again, Iowa already has the track record that they produce those interior linemen that can go out and play. And I'm in the business of making Joe Burrow happy. And, you know, we can have conversations later down the road of why that's important because of what Deshaun Watson's getting paid and because of what all these wide receivers in the NFL are now getting paid. But as you said, lock up a center for the next 5 years. You added 3 impact pieces on the rest of the offensive line, and you've got Jonah Williams coming back, who is kind of in that put up year now of, okay, it's time to take the next step. I don't know where your weakness lies. You've seen what powerful offenses can do. We saw what this Bengals offense can do last year with a terrible offensive line. What is this Bengals offense when Joe Mixon can get going even more? When the play action pass becomes even more dominant? When these receivers grow another season, a normal off season, because none of this team has had normal off seasons in the past 2 years, especially the quarterback, Joe Burrow. I think it would be an absolute no-brainer if he were to fall into the Bengals' lap at 31.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And he's part of my big 5. I've kind of made a big 5, and it's 3 linemen, 2 cornerbacks, Andrew Booth, Kaiir, Elam, and then Tyler Linderbaum, and not necessarily in this order, Tyler Linderbaum, Kenyon Green, and Zion Johnson. I assume George Karlaftis, the edge rusher from Purdue's gone. Maybe he's there, and so it becomes a big 6. Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia. Maybe he's there. Would be interesting. So it could be a big 7. I assume a couple of those guys are going to be gone anyways. Go ahead.
And Wyatt fits their mold because if you look at how this team is drafted as of late, guys that have played in big-time championships, team captains, those types of players that have come to the Cincinnati Bengals. Logan Wilson, a captain. You look at T. Higgins and Joe Burrow. We talked last year, like, Yeah, they're going to the playoffs, but they've played in bigger moments than a wild card round. They played in a national title.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about not only who, but what type of players the Bengals have drafted, meaning, hey, that guy's a 3-year captain. That guy just won a national championship. That guy played at the highest level. There's value in that. And the Bengals have kind of have not locked into that as of late. And I think it's showing up with the players they've drafted.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so when it comes to 31, those are kind of 7 guys that are mentioned and have been tied. Is there anybody else that stands out to you?
You have it in those 7. I lean Elam if I had my pick of the 2 corners.
Do you really?
Because I do.
Because he tested, or why?
I think the testing, I think there's a little bit of an unknown out there, but when you play consistently that competition, when you play and you, I think the Bengals have found a way to draft in the secondary. And I think Elam fits that mold just a little bit more. And there's not the stats on paper. It's just a feeling like I think he fits into their system and what they need to do, because look, they brought back Flowers on an extremely under the radar team friendly deal.
Yeah.
They got Eli Apple back. You know, Awuzie, when you match his stats up with some of the best in the game, he's right up there right now. So you're not now drafting and saying, you got to come be our number 1 guy. You're drafting to come in and say, hey, we need you. And on defense, you're just trying to limit the home run plays now. You're trying to hold teams to 3 instead of 7. So you can change the way you play on the outside a little bit. So I do. I barely lean Elam just a little bit more. But the 7 you mentioned, because you're drafting for depth, I think it gives you a really clear idea going forward of what this team can be.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll see if one of those 7 are available. The other part of this, go ahead.
Can you see them at all? Let's say, you know, Linderbaum's out there at 25, and I know it's so against what the Bengals ever do to move up in the draft, but they do have draft equity. They do have extra picks. And I know that it's probably more likely that they move out of 31 than move up. But does any of your 7, do they move the needle enough to say 25, 26 get there? He's still available. Let's move up a couple.
I don't think they would use a pick in this year's draft to do it.
Yeah.
But what could they use a pick in next year's draft to do it? That would be the thing. What's the price?
Right.
I think it's highly unlikely. Would I do it for Linderbaum? I would, because people ran it and raved about this kid for months.
Yep.
And then everyone knew his arms were going to be short anyways. He gets a foot injury against Kentucky in the Citrus Bowl, doesn't test, and now he's just going to be the end of the first round. Like, that's fine. Sign me up. By the way, Creed Humphrey should have been a top 20 pick last year, probably top 15. The Bengals are bozos because they didn't take him 46th overall. Sometimes the NFL overthinks center. So that would be a guy for sure that I would consider moving up for.
I don't evaluate the arm length a lot at the center position. I think at tackle, it's a legitimate concern for different players, but at center, you're not on an island. You know, and for whoever the Bengals center, if it is him coming in, you got 2 proven guys at guards that aren't going to leave you on that island. So it's not like you got to have the longest. You just got to be strong with your punch, and you've got to be that nasty. And we've heard the glass eater comment all the time in the offseason, and
he's nasty. Linderbaum's nasty.
I'm not concerned with arm length when it comes to a center. If we're talking about a tackle, a franchise tackle, then I could see some validity to that. But I'm not concerned when it comes to a center because of what's around them.
So you would trade up? Would you consider trading up for Linderbaum or one of these other guys?
I would consider, because you're drafting very uniquely this year, and there's not the guy that you have to go get. If I'm sitting back there at 23, 24, 25, and there's a guy that I love, I mean, we've seen a lot of these prospects are moving up. It doesn't cost you much in the draft. You know, you talk about, okay, I'll give you our 4th round next year so we can swap 6 picks here. Yeah, I would do that, because I think this team's in a very unique situation that if you think you get a day 1 starter added into the team you already have, then you're right back to contending for what you did last year. I mean, the question that I go into the draft, are the Bengals better right now than they were when they played in the Super Bowl? I think they are. So is there another piece that can help right away? And if so, then go get them.
And the other part of that, and I like that logic. To me, it doesn't just apply to the first round. It applies to the 63rd pick, the 95th pick, the 126th pick. I think I did the math right. It might be 136th pick. It's 136. Getting your guy is more important. They have 8 draft picks than having 8 new bodies. The 8 guys they draft, if they just stay where they are, not all 8 are making the roster. It's just not happening.
Correct.
5 might. And so if you could package both 7ths in the 6th to move up to, to get a mid 5th round pick or a late 5th round pick and get the guy you want, and I'm just spitballing here, then I think you do it, because I would much rather get the guy that's falling than not.
Yeah. And it happens every year, because I'm watching the draft every year and I'm like, wait a second, they moved up that far and they only gave that up?
Yep.
I mean, and again, I know there's the outliers that sometimes you hit a home run in the 6th round. Sometimes you hit a home run in the 7th round. But more often than not, and what the Bengals have done really well lately, that 2, 3, 4, those mid rounds, they've been really solid. And they found a lot of talent in those middle rounds that are going to continue to pay off for this team going into next year. I know it's not the Bengal way, but did anything they really did last year and this offseason encompass the Bengal way of old that we knew? I mean, this is a new thinking team. Zach Taylor he wants to get his guys. And, you saw that last year. And again, if someone's sitting there at 24, 25, and it cost me a 6th and 7th round pick, I'm all right with it.
Yeah. And it might be a 4th and a 6th and a 7th, it might be multiple. Okay. It might be a 3rd. It might be.
Right.
But again, the 95th pick, let's just say it's a 3rd this year.
Yep.
If you get a plug and play center and you're giving up the 95th pick in the 31st pick, hard for me to turn that down, right? Because of the on-field impact it's going to have.
Because they have so few needs. Mm-hmm. So you don't need 8 new players this year. You might need 1 or 2 that can come in and play right away. And then you feel like you got a really good chance to get back to the Super Bowl. That's why it's different. We're not drafting. Last year's draft, as great as it was to get Jamar Chase, everything mattered because you were coming off a 4-win season. Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of holes to fill. Where are the holes this year? Where are the glaring needs? And again, if you can get another O-lineman or a corner that you think right away can impact this team, that's worth adding depth. And no offense to Darren Simmons, it's worth adding or taking away what may have been a special teams player drafted in the 5th round.
Yep. No, totally agree. And I want to switch gears here, talk a little bit about your Cincinnati Bearcats, because, they can have up to 8 players drafted. You know what it's like to be drafted out of the University of Cincinnati. So let's break some of these guys down. And yes, Bengals fans, we'll tie it in to the Bengals. Alec Pierce had a top 30 visit with the Bengals, the wide receiver who jumps out of the gym. He dunked on Tony Pike during pickup one day. I believe that's true. If not, Tony, you can correct me. Sauce Gardner not going to be there. I know a lot of you want.
Can we trade all 8 picks?
Well, yeah. If you could just come out of this draft with Sauce Gardner, is it crazy to think that he would be like their 3rd best player on defense day one? Like, he's amazing.
He's one of He's one of the most impressive players I've ever watched at any level. His length, and he's got this. It comes off as a cockiness, but he just has a confidence about him that you can't fake and you can't replicate. And unfortunately, because of what other teams' needs are, what's the NFL right now? It is a pass-happy offensive attack league. And for Sauce, if you're the Jets and you've got to line up in your division and play the receivers that you now have to play in your division week in and week out, Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Parker, how can you let Sauce go? Because he's as close to a Revis Island type of player as I've seen.
Yeah. And to me, he might not even make it there. Houston, watch Houston at 3. But
Correct.
If he's there at 4, I think the Jets will take him. Let's talk about a couple of the others. One, quarterback wise, do you think Desmond Ridder falls out of the 1st round? Here's why that matters to the Bengals. If the Bengals Big 7 isn't there, they don't move up. And Desmond Ridder still on the board, along with Kenny Pickett and some of these other quarterbacks. And I don't necessarily think that it will happen, but if it does, then maybe a trade back could be in line and they could recoup some value that way. Yeah. So do you think Ridder is going to fall out of that first round?
I don't. And to your point, you know, it's kind of overseen sometimes why it's so important for a team to jump back into the first round if they want their quarterback, because you get an extra year of team control.
Yep.
You know, so for a Lions or someone that maybe wanted to move back, that's team control for an extra year for your quarterback, who's going to, you know, ideally be the face of your franchise. This is a very unique year because there's not that top of the draft day one, he's an automatic starter quarterback. And I don't think any of the quarterbacks in the draft are on the upper tier of NFL quarterbacks. I think they can be really good quarterbacks, but the next Joe Burrow is not in this draft. Mm-hmm. You know, the next Patrick Mahomes is not in this draft. And because of that, then I look at the intangibles. I look at who's got the most experience, Desmond Ridder. Yep. Who's got the most wins, Desmond Ridder. Say what you want about if it looks good all the time. He's the third winningest quarterback in college football history.
Insane.
So it's that's very simple to me. You know, there's questions with Pickett and the hand size. Malik Willis, I know he shows really well at pro day and stuff, but I wasn't blown away watching any of his games last year. I really do think that winning matters in the National Football League. And I think experience matters in the National Football League. Des Ridder, out of all the quarterbacks in this draft, has both of those by a landslide over the others. He's played for championships. He's been in big-time moments. I worry, as a Cincinnati Bengal fan and a huge Desmond Ridder fan, that he doesn't get past the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's my concern. And I just talked at the spring game to Dan Hort about this because Dan said the same thing. You know, Dan said, that's my nightmare because I love Dez. I obviously love the Bengals, and, you know, having to go against Dez would be a nightmare. But yeah. I really do think there's a match. He's met with him. They met before the pro day. I think the Steelers and Desmond Ridder, where he doesn't have to go and be the starter day one, but you let him bridge for a year or half a season with Mitchell Trubisky, I think it's a good fit for a team in Pittsburgh that's got a really good defense still, and they still have some weapons on the outside. They need that quarterback piece.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect fit for Desmond Ridder. I hate it. Like, I hate it too. I understand it. I think he would go there. Like, when you talk about like paths to success, right? Your path, you go behind, and you know, I'm sure you've thought about this, but you look up and Jimmy Clausen is drafted 3 rounds ahead of you or 4, whatever. Right. And it's like, well, you're never really going to have a path. Mitch Trubisky, plus that structure with those intangibles, I think it would work. Another team, and maybe the Saints take them. I think the Saints are intriguing. Let's talk about a couple guys that I think the Bengals could draft. Yeah. And Alec Pierce, I mentioned the top 30 visit at the top of the video. I think Alec Pierce is a stud because he tested really well, but that testing, all of that showed on the field. And that's very rare with these prospects. And so I like him a lot. They brought him in for the visit. What do you think about him? And then what do you think about Coby Bryant as well? Because we talked about the Bengals needing a corner. If they don't take one in round 1, I think that round 3 to 4 range, Coby Bryant might go off the board, and that might be exactly where they target a corner.
Alec Pierce has one of the best catch radiuses I've ever seen with a receiver. I mean, I've never seen a guy go up consistently and get more jump balls and one-on-one ball. And the only thing that hurt Alec Pierce, he was Des Ridder's go-to, but the style of offense in which UC ran was not, you know, conducive to a receiver blowing up. You know, they love the tight end. They love the tight end in the flats. They use the quarterback run, and they used Jerome Ford a ton last year. So, you know, if he's on a pass-happy team that throws 50 times a game, the stats that Alec Pierce would have put up were crazy. You know, he's a smart guy. You look at where he's at from an education standpoint. You look at his vertical. You look at all the testing numbers, and then just go watch his route running and his ability to win one-on-one balls. And then, if you're still not sold, watch the Alabama game. A team in Alabama who's got the best of the best, they doubled Alec Pierce the whole game because they tried early in the game and they couldn't single coverage Alec Pierce. Now, Dez couldn't get the ball out a lot of times because he was under pressure. But if you watch late in that first quarter throughout the rest of the game, they sent help to Alec Pierce's side consistently. And I think that's a huge endorsement for a guy when a Nick Saban coach team says, we need help over here with that player. And that's what Alec Pierce can be. I think he would be a steal for any team that falls into those mid rounds. And then I'm a huge Coby guy because it got to a point where early in the season, teams were like, you know what, this Sauce guy, I'll throw at him. I don't believe the hype. And then teams said, I believe the hype. So we're not even throwing at Sauce. So Coby saw the highest percentage of routes thrown at him, and he won the Thorpe Award for the country's best corner, right? Like Sauce was so good that teams had to decide that they're going to throw at the Thorpe winner. And that to me is a testament to both of those players for UC. But Coby feels like the type of player that is going to have like that 10 to 12 solid NFL year career, right? Because he's got, and he talks openly about the Mamba mentality and his work ethic. And he was tested not because if Sauce won on the other side, Coby would have never been tested, but he was tested because a top 5 pick was on the other side. And all he did was go out and win the Thorpe Award. So Sauce gets the notoriety. Coby's going to be a steal for a team where they need a corner. He can play safety at times if they need him to. I was just talking to the strength coach of the University of Cincinnati, Brady Collins, about that at the spring game. Coby can play safety. He can play corner. He can contribute to special teams. I just think he's got the mentality and the makeup that you need at the NFL level.
Would you take, so let's say the Bengals got Linderbaum round 1. Would you consider Pierce with that 63rd pick, or are you waiting till 95? Because I don't necessarily think he'd be there at 95.
Yeah. I don't think he'd be there at 95. I think he'd be there for your second round pick. And again, if you lock up your offensive line, well, then you're sitting in a situation where that receiver, because let's face it, when the money all hashes itself out in the next couple of years, Tyler Boyd's probably going to be one of those guys that's on the outside looking in. I mean, look at the money that wide receivers are getting. Who better than a guy who doesn't need every pass? That's Alec Pierce doesn't need every ball thrown his way.
And do you think he could be a slot type of receiver in the next level? Okay, go ahead.
You look at the Edelmans, the Westwell, those slot hard nose that Brady made a living with. Like that's where he could line up outside, but he can also line up inside. He's a big, tough kid. He has speed to stretch the field that we've seen, but he also can run those underneath routes. And if you were to, again, this is looking down the line, if you're to pair him up with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Alec Pierce, that's a really tough trio in the future, on top of whatever happens with Tyler Boyd for this team going forward.
And Coby Bryant, you think round 3, round 4? Am I projecting that right?
3 or 4. I do. I think, again, how many years past would you think the Thorpe winner was going to go that long? Yeah. Because he was dominant and he played at a high level. And he was, again, he was always tested because that was the other team's only option. Well, we got to test him because we can't go the other way. And like I said, it's a testament to Sauce Gardner, but it's also a testament to Coby, who came back for an extra year. He understood that. He worked on his craft, and he was, again, one of the best corners to play last year in college football.
Great stuff from the one, the only Tony Pike, Bearcats legend. Talks about the Bengals every single day, it seems like, on ESPN 1530, noon to 2 on Cincy 360. If you're not in Cincinnati, well, you can tune in on the iHeartRadio app, wherever you, on your iPhone, on your iPad, or Android, if you have an Android. I think we're both iPhone people, Tony. So, yeah, I appreciate the time, my man. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing what Bengals, what the Bengals do with their 8 picks. Maybe it'll be less. Maybe it'll be a couple Bearcats and Tyler Linderbaum. Wouldn't be mad at it. I'll tell you that much.
Sold.
Thanks for the time, Tom.
Yes, sir.